This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Agency said on Friday Ukrainian units were entering the southern city of Kherson and told any Russian troops still there to surrender. Video obtained by Reuters on Friday shows a man waving the Ukrainian flag in front of people gathered at Freedom Square in Kherson. Russia's defense ministry said earlier on Friday it had completed the withdrawal of its troops from Kherson and retreated to the western bank of the Dnipro River. A former military figure is frank about Russia's military failures, AP correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports.
General Ben Hodges, former commanding general of the U.S. Army forces in Europe, describes the retreat from Kherson as a colossal failure for Russia and says Russian military commanders should have pulled all their forces out of the city weeks ago to put the Dnieper River between them and Ukraine's advancing troops. Hodges, speaking to the Associated Press, says he expected Ukrainian commanders would work to keep the pressure on Russia's depleted forces in the weeks ahead, possibly aiming for a future push next year for Crimea, seized by Russia in 2014. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Top Russian and UN officials are holding talks in Switzerland to try to iron out the extension of a deal allowing Ukrainian grain shipments and Russian food and fertilizer exports. There's just a week over before the wartime agreement meant to ease a global food crisis is set to expire. The deal is critical because Ukraine and Russia are major suppliers of grain and other food to parts of the world where many are already going hungry. Find more at voanews.com. This is VOA News. President Joe Biden says the U.S. is keeping its commitment toward fighting climate change and urges other nations to commit to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. AP correspondent Jackie Quinn reports.
At the UN's COP27 summit in the Egyptian resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh,
the climate crisis is about human security.
President Biden says the U.S. investment in green energy pays off in several ways.
We're proving that good climate policy is good economic policy.
He's announced a new regulation to crack down on methane emissions, considered worse than carbon, and renewed the U.S. commitment to cut greenhouse gases in half by 2030. Jackie Quinn, Washington.
Southeast Asian leaders have done little to ramp up pressure on Myanmar to comply with their plan for peace, agreeing to a course of action that largely kicks the matter down the road. With violence in Myanmar spiraling out of control since the military seized power in 2021, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations has been trying to implement a 5-point plan for peace, so far with little effect. The group has banned leaders of Myanmar from participating in its top-level events, and some had been pushing for that ban to be broadened. Beijing is reporting a new wave of COVID-19 cases. AP correspondent Donna Warder reports.
Beijing has shut down city parks and imposed other restrictions after more than 10,700 new cases were reported today. Most of the cases tested positive but showed no symptoms. Many city schools have switched to online classes and hospitals are restricting services. Some shops and restaurants are also closed. More than 5 million people already have been under lockdown in the manufacturing hub of Guangzhou, as well as another western megacity. I'm Donna Warder.
U.S. voters in the state of Colorado have passed a ballot initiative to decriminalize psychedelic mushrooms for people 21 and older and to create state-regulated centers where participants can experience the drug. Colorado's initiative eventually will allow an advisory board to add other plant-based psychedelic drugs to the program. Proponents argued the state's current approach to mental health has failed and that naturally occurring psychedelics can treat depression, PTSD, anxiety, and addiction. Critics said decriminalization would jeopardize public safety. Find more on our website, voanews.com. or follow us for the latest news and information on the VOA mobile app. Reporting by remote, I'm Joe Ramsey.
This is VOA News. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton. U.S. President Joe Biden was in Cambodia on Saturday attending a meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, otherwise known as ASEAN. In his remarks at the opening of the meeting, President Biden said the U.S. has dedicated hundreds of millions of dollars to strengthen U.S. ties with Southeast Asia.
We're continuing to build on that progress, following through on our commitments and launching concrete new initiatives that further strengthen ASEAN and increase connectivity across Southeast Asia.
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was also at that meeting. He says Canada has just launched a new Indo-Pacific cooperation.
This is a serious strategy that aims to deepen and strengthen our engagement in the region in the long term, putting ASEAN at the center of our strategy. This is a generational shift. And today I'm announcing concrete investments that are part of our commitment to this relationship.
Also, President Biden on Saturday raised concerns with the leader of Cambodia about Chinese activities at its Ream naval base. He stressed the importance of full transparency. Biden said in a meeting with long-serving Prime Minister Hun Sen that he'd urged him to release activists held on politically motivated charges and open up political and civic space ahead of elections next year. This all according to the White House in a statement on Saturday. Russia on Saturday restated its insistence on unhindered access to world markets for its food and fertilizer exports after what it called a thorough exchange of views with UN officials the day before. From Washington, this is VOA News. In the United States, there are still millions of uncounted ballots in the state of California, which could be the key to determining which political party will have control of Congress. AP correspondent Jackie Quinn has more.
More than a dozen congressional races remain in play in California. About half have tight enough margins they could tip either way. Republicans so far have locked down 211 of the 218 seats needed to claim control of the new Congress. But it's still too early to know whether or not Democrats will reach that threshold. In California, the primary battlegrounds are Orange County, southeast of Los Angeles, and the Central Valley. If Democrats lose control of the House, it's expected the next speaker would be California Republican Kevin McCarthy. It's not clear if Nancy Pelosi will lead the caucus again if Democrats retain control. Jackie Quinn, Washington.
Nevada's ballot count is entering its final act, and it may determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. If Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto finishes ahead, her party will have a majority in the upper chamber thanks to the tie-breaking vote held by the nation's vice president, Democrat Kamala Harris. If Republican challenger Adam Laxalt wins, the GOP will have a shot at picking up its 51st Senate seat and a straight majority if its candidate Herschel Walker also wins in Georgia's runoff election next month. Saturday is the last day mail ballots can arrive and be counted in Nevada. Election officials are working hard to get through a backlog of tens of thousands of remaining votes. Kenyan soldiers landed in the city of Goma in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo on Saturday as part of a regional military operation targeting rebels in the conflict-torn region. 2 planes carrying about 100 Kenyan troops touched down in Goma Airport on Saturday, where they were greeted by local dignitaries. Their arrival comes as the M23 militia has surged across the DRC's North Kivu province, capturing swaths of territory and inflaming tensions in Central Africa. Australia's Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neill said on Sunday that the government would consider making illegal the paying of ransoms to cyber hackers, this following cyber attacks affecting millions of Australians recently. And an iconic sign of the holidays has arrived in New York City. Crane hoisted an 82-foot Norway spruce into place at Rockefeller Plaza. The family of Neil Leibowitz donated the tree after it was spotted by the Rockefeller Center's head gardener. The Christmas tree will officially be lit on November 30th. You can find more on this and all the stories we're covering at our website, voanews.com. Via remote, I'm Marissa Melton, VOA News.
This is VOA News. Via remote, I'm Diane Roberts. Authorities say a bomb has exploded on a major pedestrian avenue in the heart of Istanbul, killing 6 people and wounding dozens at a popular thoroughfare lined with shops and restaurants. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan called Sunday's blast a treacherous attack and said its perpetrators would be punished. Istanbul's governor tweeted that 6 people were killed and dozens more wounded. Indonesia's president says Southeast Asia will not become the battleground for a new Cold War as tensions rise between the U.S. and China. AP correspondent Karen Chamas reports.
Speaking at the summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Joko Widodo said the 10-nation bloc must not be disturbed by outside struggles.
ASEAN must be a dignified region, uphold the values of humanity and democracy. ASEAN should not let current geopolitical dynamic turn into a new Cold War in our region.
As China has grown more assertive in the region, it has pressed its claim to the self-governing democracy of Taiwan. As a result, the U.S. has pushed back, leading to increasing tensions. I'm Karen Chamas.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned on Sunday that the Kherson region still remained dangerous 3 days after the end of Russia's occupation. In his nightly address, the president said there are mines, adding one of their sappers, quote, was killed and 4 others were injured while clearing mines. Residents said Russian troops plundered the city, carting away loot as they withdrew last week. Despite that news, some residents are rejoicing. Crowds gathered Sunday on the city's main square celebrating Ukrainian troops entering the city. This is VOA News. East African leaders on Sunday announced peace talks in a bid to stabilize Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where M23 rebels clashed with troops just north of the city of Goma over the weekend. The 7-nation East African community stated that it would hold a peace dialogue on Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo on November 21st in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Iran on Sunday issued its first death sentence over the protests that have shaken the country's clerical leadership, the judiciary said, with a rights group warning other convicts risked being hastily executed. The almost 2 months of protests sparked by the death of Masa Amini, who had been arrested by the morality police, have prompted authorities to unleash a crackdown that has seen thousands detained. Some have been charged with offenses that could see them face the death penalty in a country that Amnesty International says executes more people annually than any nation other than China. U.S. President Joe Biden says he's looking forward to the next session of Congress after Democrats kept control of the Senate and held on to many contested House seats. AP correspondent Jackie Quinn reports.
Democrats have the 50 votes they need in the Senate, and the Georgia runoff election next month could make it 51. President Biden says he's hearing pundits back away from the influence of Donald Trump.
But all Trump has done is reveal who the Republican Party is.
Republican Senator Bill Cassidy on NBC's Meet the Press says Trump's candidates didn't fare that well.
We're not a cult. We're not like, okay, there's one person who leads our party.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Democrats did better than expected because they focused on helping Americans. She was asked if she'll seek the top spot again if Democrats do keep control of the House.
I'm not making any comments until this election is finished.
She appeared on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Jackie Quinn, Washington.
Slovenians on Sunday elected a lawyer linked to former U.S. First Lady Melania Trump as the country's first woman president, according to partial results with more than half the votes counted. The human rights advocate is vowed to be the voice of women in Slovenia and abroad, and a moral authority in her new role, though the post is largely ceremonial. As a lawyer, she was hired to protect the interest of Slovenian-born Trump during her husband's presidency, stopping companies attempting to commercialize products with her name. The United Nations says it's investigating allegations of misconduct by Egyptian police officers providing security at this year's international climate talks. This follows claims that attendees of events at the German pavilion at the COP27 summit were photographed and filmed after Germany.
This is VOA News. Reporting via remote, I'm Jeff Custer. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky visited the southern city of Kherson Monday to celebrate its recapture from Russian forces after months of occupation. Associated Press correspondent Karen Shamas reports.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky posed with soldiers in the city's central square. Zelensky is known to appear in frontline zones at crucial junctures in the war to support troops and congratulate them for battlefield exploits. Video footage showed Zelensky waving to residents who waved at him from an apartment window and yelled "Glory to Ukraine." The reply from Zelensky and his entourage was "Glory to the heroes." The liberation of Kherson is one of Ukraine's biggest successes in the war so far and comes after a grinding offensive that forced the Russians to withdraw from the key city. I'm Karen Chamas.
Minutes before he arrived at Kherson, shelling was reported to be heard from the center of the city. After Zelensky finished speaking, several more blasts of artillery gunfire echoed over the area. In his daily address Sunday, Zelensky reminded citizens the situation in Kherson region is still very dangerous. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Monday the Russian war with Ukraine was creating food and energy crises, and that disruptions to grain shipments and energy supplies have pushed costs of living sharply higher. The Associated Press reports the Canadian leader was addressing the Business 20 Summit, the official dialogue forum with the global business community ahead of the two-day G20 summit, which starts in Bali Tuesday. The situation in Ukraine is expected to be high on the summit agenda. Trudeau said families are worried they're not going to be able to put food on the table or heat their homes during the winter. He said these challenges are real and only can be solved through collaboration between business, governments, and civil society. This is VOA News. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping met for talks ahead of the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia, Monday, the first in-person meeting between the two leaders since Biden took office nearly 2 years ago. After shaking hands, the two sat down to begin their discussions. Biden told Xi it is important the two superpowers work together to address the world's problems.
The world expects, I believe, China and the United States to play key roles in addressing global challenges from climate changes to food insecurity, and for us to be able to work together. The United States stands ready to do just that, work with you if that's what you desire.
While their statements before the talks were polite and upbeat, reports following the meeting say the two leaders discussed some of the key points of contention between their two nations. In a statement following the talks, the White House said Biden has objected to what it says is China's coercive and increasingly aggressive actions towards Taiwan. Biden also raised human rights concerns during the meeting with Chinese President Xi. Police in the southeastern U.S. state of Virginia Monday were still searching for a suspect in the shooting that left 3 people dead and 2 others wounded on the University of Virginia campus. Associated Press correspondent Jennifer King reports.
In a letter posted to social media, University of Virginia President Jim Ryan said 3 people were killed and 2 others wounded in a shooting at a parking garage on the north edge of the Charlottesville campus late Sunday. The university's emergency management issued an alert about an active attacker firearm and warned students to shelter in place. Classes were canceled today. The UVA Police Department says multiple agencies were searching for a suspect who is considered armed and dangerous. Ryan wrote that the alleged suspect was a student, Christopher Darnell Jones of Richmond. This is a message any leader hopes never to have to send, Ryan wrote, and I am devastated that this violence has visited the University of Virginia. I'm Jennifer King.
Britain and France have signed an agreement Monday to join forces to curb the tide of migrants across the English Channel into Britain. Under the new agreement, Britain is set to pay France $75 million to strengthen security that would prevent migrants and asylum seekers from navigating small vessels from France across the dangerous waterway. The deal provides for a 40% increase in patrols and the increased use of drones and other technology to prevent crossings. The agreement also stipulates the two countries would share information about smugglers and other concerns obtained from the intercepted migrants. French Interior Minister Gerald Darmanin and British Home Secretary Suella Braverman signed the pact Monday in Paris. As he arrived in Bali for the G20 summit on Monday, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the deal will make a difference, but it's just the first step in a long process. More information on this story and all the stories we're covering can be found at our website, voanews.com.